Hello, everyone. Hi out there. So, welcome to the musical QuaranStream with Glen and Bri. I am Glen.
I'm tired.
Yes, Bri is very tired.
I'm also Bri. We'll change the name to with Glen and Tired later.
Glen and
for
Tired,
the dad
yes.
jokes.
And Bristol, hello. See you checking in the chat. Thanks for joining us today. All right, and well, let's see. Not a whole lot of theater stuff that we've watched since the last time.
I went back to work.
Yes.
Which is why I'm tired.
Yes.
There's no.
Yes, Lola is going crazy tonight. Let's see. I guess do we want to talk about the big news for the Broadway season?
Sure. I mean, I think most people probably ever heard. I think the most exciting thing that's coming up is Hamilton.
Yeah.
That's happening pretty soon here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very excited about Animal Crossing letting you swim.
Yes.
That's happening very soon. But, you know, there was an announcement basically that Broadway's not going to return until next year, which I think kind of a lot of people are all in the same boat. It's just been very hard for everyone in a pandemic. Like, I can't think of too many people who are like, this was pleasant. I just think that I felt like I was in a pretty recession-proof industry, working for clinical research, working in a hospital, and I was really heavily affected. And I think, there's a lot of people in the entertainment industry that have been affected, and there have been a few people that I feel that if you set up your company in a way, or you're pretty self-sufficient, you can kind of keep running, or if you're in the right place at the right time, but it's been hard.
Yeah, and it is a very difficult thing. I had to take a poll recently. There's one of the many job search websites that I have an account on asked me to take a poll on my future prospects for work as things are reopening. And I was like, oh, hey, most of what I do still requires, like, an audience or interaction with people, so...
Oh, that's the way this works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, we're going to be quarantined for quite a bit longer.
Yes.
I don't think that we really know how July is going to shake out, but it's not looking great. I always say my greatest fear at this point is there will be 250,000 people dead by the time this thing is over. Global cases has passed 10 million. We're almost at 3 million just in this country alone. Please, still wear your masks. I'm fairly lucky because if I work in my office, I don't really have to wear a mask because I work by myself and nobody else is really there. It's just there to get away from this madness. If I'm here, I'm going to want to finish painting, or I'm going to want to finish, setting stuff up in the house. And I can't really be focused on that right now. I have to earn some money. So I've been going into work. I'll probably be going into work for the next foreseeable future, unless something else changes. But it's going to look pretty different. And I know we have friends out there with kids that are really stressing out. We have friends out there that are teachers that are really stressing out. I know a lot of the physicians that I work with are really stressing out. So I think that where I was in terms of sheer panic and terror at the beginning of the quarantine, I think everybody's caught up to that. And it's not that I'm not terrified still, but I feel like I was running on full throttle since March, and now I'm kind of like, well, yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? We're still plugging away.
Well, and if you want to share anything about your stories in quarantine, or how you're feeling about stuff, or kind of what's going on with surges in your area, please feel free to share in the comments below. I think that, talking about it certainly helped us.
Yeah.
And we're happy to listen. But listening does not make a great vlog or, broadcast. So,
yes.
we will try to listen as we see it posted on YouTube, or if it's posted here tonight. But we'll get moving forward with the pitch.
But 5th of July is Hamilton.
No, 3rd.
3rd.
Yeah.
3rd.
It's happening before 4th of July.
All right, 3rd of July. Hamilton shows up on Disney Plus. Only edit is they've cut a couple of instances of one word. But it's going to be great to see it. It's a professionally shot version of the Broadway show. So if you have Disney Plus, make certain that you're tuning in for that. I promise you it will be at least as worth the subscription for Disney Plus as The Mandalorian was.
Yep. I like staying close to home and listening to my hair grow.
Yes.
Yep.
That's,
Agreed.
that is why. You guys down in Bristol, stay safe. I've been reading about there's a surge in cases in Southwest Virginia, so do what it takes to stay safe down there.
Yeah, I think if I could have kind of my dream hope at this point is it would be nice to have another stimulus check for common people. I think that's what folks really need right now. I think that would help us out a lot. I think it would help a lot of folks out. I was talking with one of my friends who's a nurse, and her partner runs restaurants in the area, and they're just shutting down a whole restaurant because they just expanded this year, and with the pandemic and students not coming back, it's just going to be real hard. And students might come back, students might not come back, but I think nobody's lived through anything like this, so a lot of things are here.
And $1,200 was, sure, $1,200, that's enough to live on for 3 months. But it's starting to run low, isn't it? So.
I think I see a lot of, my fellow community members. What I really like is that there is a mutual aid society that I follow on Facebook, which people are really kind of going above and beyond and helping each other out, and I think that that's great. But I think that, we've been lucky enough that my parents have paid for 2 months of where we live because they're retired and they were able to. I realize not everybody else is that fortunate. I would not have been able to pay for our normal amount to live here with my furlough, and that's real hard. Also, the fact that that my parents helped purchase this place. We're not under threat that a landlord is going to kick us out, and that's a lot to do with white privilege and what wealth my parents were able to kind of contribute to help kind of initially keep me safe because it's where I lived in grad school, but not everybody has that, and I think having been in a household where we both lost our jobs kind of at the same time and had to rely really on unemployment to keep paying our lease, and had to get out of a bunch of leases and figure that out. We know how stressful that is, and it's not getting any better. A lot of things are going to get a lot worse before they get a lot better. Mm-hmm. So, I think even my furlough, we talk about that and the people who have had to take 20% pay cuts and all this other stuff where, putting off medical procedures, putting off, I think I have to replace the air filter in my car, nothing that's going to be deadly, which again is a privilege for us, but things that normally would get an economy going really is not happening. I think we would have finished setting up the house faster if we had disposable income to, maybe hire painters or, maybe take vacation time so that I could finish painting and setting things up and getting things taken care of. So this was actually a house instead of living in boxes. And I'll be honest, I feel like I'm getting a little bit disgusted looking at it, but I also have the benefit and the privilege of going to a job where I'm fairly safe and I don't come in contact with a whole heck of a lot of people, and it's a good salary once I have it again. So I think that because we are, in the grand scheme of things, mildly inconvenienced, we know how hard it is for folks, and there really should have been some sort of relief package for everybody. I think one of the best things that I kind of heard of where our country was versus where our country is sadly Carl Reiner passed away recently, and he's just a legend in entertainment. But they said, he only got started on that path because he was going to work repairing sewing machines. And because of the WPA, he decided theater was for him and got jobs working in theater. And, I think a lot of our friends who work in the entertainment industry would have loved if there was a WPA, if there was a New Deal program that would have afforded them the luxury to act and write and perform and get that experience. And further American culture. We have a friend who works in Orlando who is fairly unsure what she's going to do, and even though I think she owns her house and her and her partner are fairly successful, it's really horrible to know there's no job for you to go back to.
Yeah. So
on that cheery note.
Oh, well.
What I will say is, I kind of picked the book that I picked mainly because, I think everybody with Hamilton looming on the horizon, people are looking at, well, what's the next Hamilton? And we've had things like 1776, we had Hamilton, we have Bloody Andrew Jackson. I think there was even a Ben Franklin musical that's fairly obscure.
Ben Franklin in Paris. Yes.
So I think there's a few things of presidents and founding fathers, and it's really fortunate that this lines up with 4th of July. I don't think it wouldn't have if we didn't observe that week for Black Lives Matter. So everything happens for a reason, I suppose, and that kind of hollow platitude. But I have always really been fascinated with why do we do things against capitalism in this country? And I think the trust busting and regulation that protects us from, harmful chemicals in our food and products that we buy and consume. And I think things like the national parks. And that all kind of got tied back to the turn of, a couple centuries ago. And that had a lot to do with things that were enacted during Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And this was back in the time, before the Republicans and the Democrats flipped, right? So there's a couple of Republican presidents in our history that really had these, really amazing social programs. And what it came from a lot was if you were born into a modicum of wealth and you had an ability to go to a private school and be educated, there was this realization in the 1900s where most people didn't have that. And so you had a real responsibility to make sure that you spread wealth and education and do something for your fellow man. And so this is where a lot of these things started to come from, is a lot of people not working in, squalid conditions. And if you've ever, what's the book? The Jungle?
Yes.
By Upton Sinclair. That's where this came from. It's like there was, excrement and filth and garbage going into what people ate. I think my favorite story is Teddy Roosevelt saw a woman changing a baby's diaper next to where she was rolling a cigar and was like, oh God, I don't want to smoke that. So, I think that just to see a time where presidents and leaders and philanthropists, not that everybody always did the right thing, but at least I think their hearts were in the right place. I think that they did want to try to do better. There's still some fairly racist policies, and there's still some, whether people really felt like they're doing the right thing or not. But I do think that having things like, trust busting and making sure there's not yellow journalism and making sure that there are protections in place for people really kind of came at when my grandparents immigrated to this country. So I've always really been fascinated by it because I was always kind of raised on that idea of this country wants everybody to have an education. This country wants everybody to be able to provide for their families. I talk a lot about my grandfathers were the sole providers. My grandmother stayed at home, and both my mom and my dad came from families of 4 children each. So to not be necessarily super wealthy, but to have both of my grandfathers retire at 55 and to have their kids have an option to go to college if they wanted to, and have a car and to go on a vacation every year. Those were kind of big American ideals. And then, kind of I think through our generation, we really see that erode. either through policies or through shifting politics. And so I was a bit enamored. I wanted to read The Bully Pulpit. Number one, because Doris Kearns Goodwin is a great writer, and I really enjoy her style of writing. This book is thick. If you go into our bookshop, which I know we'll have it running later,
Yes.
if you go into our bookshop and you want to purchase it, don't be intimidated by it. You know, I hate to say, like, I don't read as much as I'd like to. I've started reading a lot more because it's been a real calming influence during the pandemic. But I read through this book and I just kind of like chewed it up. I sped read it. And it was mainly because of figuring out how did we get presidents in power who wanted to redistribute wealth and give power back to people. And so I really like it. It's kind of like, you know, I feel like where they did it maybe kind of tongue-in-cheek with Bloody Buddy Andrew Jackson and populism and stuff like that. I think that this is really like, you know, people who were confident leaders so that they could be unpopular. And I think, again, like Hamilton, this is a story of two political leaders and their not only their initial friendship, but their eventual, you know, conflict. So it's just really, really interesting. And there's like some other pieces in there of like, this is when Hawaii became a state. This is when we had Guam as a U.S. territory. We were trying to like work with the Philippines, and that's like why, you know, my dad, when he went to Vietnam, got stationed in the Philippines because we're allies. I mean, it's just really interesting. It's stuff that I don't think that you normally know otherwise when you just kind of go through American history in public school. And so it's like that's kind of one, you know, why Doris Kearns Goodwin won the MacArthur Genius Grant, right?
Yes.
You know, is you want these smart people to kind of like tell you these things, and then it puts things in a little bit more context. I actually had to, before I was like doing this, it's like, all right, when did she start? And I was like, who was before Roosevelt? Oh yeah, McKinley. So I didn't retain everything, but I still would say, like, if this is a book that you kind of want to start on, I would look at this. And then I've had a few of my teacher friends recommend like other things that would be really fun to read. And one that's kind of been on my back burner for a while, but I'd love to read next is I think it's called Washington's Son. And it's about the relationship with Lafayette and his impact on our country. That's also another thing I find really interesting is there's a lot of French philosophers and a lot of French politics that have really been not only in our like nation's creation, but also like our education. Like there's so much of this initial, you know, French way of thinking that was kind of founded in our educational system, which is really neat as well. And this is all kind of stuff that Lafayette brought over and why he was really beloved. Like why we have places called like, you know, Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. So that's kind of the next thing I want to read. There's a bunch of stuff I want to read, but The Bully Pulpit was kind of where everything kind of started for me because it was long and engaging, and it went really from, you know, McKinley all the way to like FDR. So you get a lot of things to chew on there. Now, how did this become a musical?
That's what I'm wondering.
I don't know.
And that's our show.
And that's my pitch. Now, I mean, I just feel like the character of Teddy Roosevelt is just such a compelling character. As a little kid, he was very sick. Very sick little kid. This is why I also think I like the story, because I was a very sick little kid growing up. But through like sheer will and determination, he was just like, I'm not going to let it get me down. And he would do like breathing exercises and climb trees and learn to box. And he was just like really that epitome of a person who was like, I'm going to change my destiny. You know, I think that it would be very easy for, you know, a wealthy young boy who is not necessarily the best of health to just be like, okay, and live at home. And he really was motivated to improve his station. And so to see that kind of like passed on to like, I want to improve the station of others was really neat. What I really would have loved to done when I was in Ohio is like Taft is from Ohio, and the Cuyahoga River and everything. But that was not the part of Ohio we lived in. But I still would have really loved to see it because apparently his house is still there, and it's a very nice neighborhood and everything. So it's like always wanted to see that. And I think that most of us, You know, and I'm just going to be a little bit open here, right? You know, as a fat person, like, you know, Taft was fat, right? You know, that was the one thing they would talk. You got stuck in the bathtub.
Yeah, in the 90s, there was like a run of TV shows making jokes about Taft getting stuck in the bathtub.
Right.
And I have no clue what book released back then that had it.
Well, and like, just like the biggest irony, and you'll kind of like read this, is I think he was only like 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he was kind of fairly a normal American size now, you know? So I think that that was fairly an interesting revelation. And also, gosh, he loved the Philippines. Like, they have this whole thing, like, he would have loved to have just been the ambassador to the Philippines. He had a great life there. He threw big parties. Him and his wife loved it. And not that he hated the presidency, but some of his best work was before he was president. I think he was also the first president that served on all three parts of the...
so far, the only one.
Yes.
Yeah. He served in all three branches of the government.
Yeah, so he was a judge, and apparently like a really good judge. You know, what do I have to base it on? I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 1900s, but yeah, and I think that he was very, very smart. I think the one thing that drove a wedge between him and Teddy is they didn't agree on all the same issues, and also Teddy was very charismatic, and he really wasn't. And so I think the way Teddy reacted to stuff, he wanted, you know, Taft to react to it that way, and it just didn't happen. And I think sometimes, like, the other big conflict is, you know, we didn't have term limits back then. And so I think, you know, Teddy Roosevelt saying, well, I'm going to give up being president so my friend can become president. He ended up presenting that.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like there's a lot of, like, really interesting drama there. I'm not really sure why there hasn't been a stage show, and I think that's just why I want it to be a stage show, is I feel like there's a lot of, like, really interesting and good stuff there. And the way I kind of initially gained access is I used to vacation on Sanibel Island when I was a little kid, and my parents lived there, like, now. They don't... Okay, my parents don't live on Sanibel. That's, like, rich people, but they do live near there. And there's this large nature preserve called Ding Darling. And Ding Darling was one of the original political satirist cartoonists, and he would do really revolutionary things back in the 1900s, like talk about environmentalism. Like, it's really important that we save the environment. And a lot of Ding Darling's work convinced Teddy Roosevelt that we need to preserve these places. And I'm always so appreciative when I go back to Sanibel that this place is a preserve. We cannot build a hotel here because property is so valuable and so expensive on Sanibel. I'm sure they would love another hotel, but no, there's now manatees and mangroves and, you know, all these, like, lovely little critters and all these, like, lovely, you know, ecosystems that have been saved from stuff that happened, you know, over 100 years ago. And I think that that's worthy of kind of looking at and talking about and, you know, kind of highlighting, like, you know, one of the rare times I think our country really said, you know, we need to give things back to the people. Like, it's not just rich people that deserve to do things. It's everybody. So.
Well, and I like, you mentioned very early on sort of the idea of this actually pairs very well with Hamilton, because Hamilton is a show that, yes, it's about the political career of Alexander Hamilton, but it's also about the fact that, you know, before this show came along, the thing most people knew about Hamilton was he was killed in a duel with Aaron Burr. You know, he was a vice president, got killed in a duel. And what this show really established was it wasn't just like tempers flared or anything like that. This was a lifelong relationship between these two people, that they had been constant rivals for the same sort of, like, position in society and things like that. And it built to a head eventually. And I sort of like, I like whenever you think of the relationship between Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. And you said something very nice there about, you know, Taft was not the charismatic man that Roosevelt was. And I like that idea as being like a core for this musical. Is the idea that this is fire and ice. This is the passionate outspoken, Bully Pulpit, and the calm, cool, considerate man.
Yes. Well, and like there's two other things that I'm gonna tell stories about that I enjoy, and hopefully, like you guys will start reading this book. Like I feel like this is more like book club than a pitch right now. Is back when Teddy Roosevelt was breaking up the monopolies and the trust and stuff. There was big protests, and they had big effigies of him. He was like really upset. Well, he showed up, and he was like, "Yeah, that's great. That was a great joke." He like loved it. Like he was so into it. And I was like, "Can you just?" I mean, we literally don't see that now. You don't see a president showing up to the people that hate you. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that our paper mache head." Great. I was like, who is that type of person that does that? Like, was so really self-confident, knew who they were. So I was like, I enjoyed that. And then the other story, of course, because I love the Muppets, which this seems very like a wild tangent, but where we get Kermit is Teddy Roosevelt's son, Kermit. And Teddy Roosevelt's son, Kermit, died in World War I. It was very sad. And there were towns all over this country named after him. I was like, dude, I don't see that happening with Donald Trump's kids. Like, there's not going to be like a Donald, Illinois that like pops up. There's not going to be like an Eric, Tennessee. Like, I mean, this was really like back when, presidents who did things for the people were really beloved. To the point that when they lost a child, the whole nation mourned. And I think probably the last time that has happened, at least in our parents' lifetime, was probably Kennedy. It's just a very weird time of, just in the span of 100 years, how much things have kind of changed in our country. And so I was just like really, really just kind of like interested in all this, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of great little stories like that. I mean, I think that was the charming thing, if you can say, about Hamilton and Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, is you have these vignettes into the legend, or the 2 seconds we learned when we had to memorize all the presidents in school.
Yeah. Now it's kind of an interesting thought that I'm kind of wondering about now. Is I could see this being a commentary on, leadership and the appropriate use of power and the concept of from those to whom much has been given, much is expected, and that sort of thing. I could also see this as a commentary on the intersection of politics and celebrity. Yep. That one of the things you talked about, people, we don't see things like let's name a town after the son of. I kind of wonder if it's because with modern communications, we've been able to see sort of more of the tawdry side of politics. Yeah. So Roosevelt and Taft really came at that cusp of mass communication was still the written report and the radio and things like that, and saying, the president says today, Uhura is just off camera wanting attention very badly. It was all the report of the story and the transcript of the speech. And then shortly after that, you get the introduction of television into the political discourse. And then ultimately turning into the 24-hour news cycle.
And I'm also going to tell one more story, because you made me think about like the negative side of being president. So like, I think one of the worst things, I mean, there was bigger criticisms, and I think it had to do with probably like educated people making educated criticisms, and maybe because this was like the introduction of, getting the kids off the farm and getting them into schools and stuff like that, that we really didn't have like the educated population we have now to be critical. But one of the things I think is so funny, tying it back into another one of our QuaranStreams of 99% Invisible. Do you remember the one with the possum?
Yes.
So Teddy Roosevelt had this big story about found a baby bear and took the baby bear home, and then teddy bears exploded. Everybody wanted a teddy bear.
Yeah.
That's where that came from. So anyway, William Howard Taft, wanted to be known as like a Taft possum, a Willie possum. I don't know what they would call it, but it was because of all the wrong reasons. It didn't have this beautiful lore of I found a baby and now he lives with me and oh, it's cute. It was like, I sure like eating possum.
Yes.
And I had some constituents send me a possum for Thanksgiving, and I ate it a lot.
Well, there was also the story of there was actually someone who had sunk a lot of money into the idea of, I think they were going to call him the Billy Possum or something like that. That sunk a lot of money into this, and then as part of it, invited Taft to a big festival celebrating the possum, and Taft ate 3 possum in one sitting, and was just this is the most delicious animal ever.
Yes, and it's an American animal, only found in America. I mean, they really, really tried. Bless their little PR heart teams, but...
Yes, but the Billy Possum did not take off.
No, it's you gotta have that lore around it. You can't just be oh...
It's a fun animal. Yeah.
So I really like that as well.
Yeah,
I think that's great. But that's why I think it's such a compelling topic for a show. And I mean, to be honest, I'd love to see it as a musical because musicals are my, de rigueur.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go musicals every single time. But I'd even take, a TV show like The Tudors or something. The Roosevelts, and then we span, the majority of the 20th century under Roosevelt leadership.
I'm just saying, Nick Offerman as Teddy Roosevelt.
Be perfect.
Yeah.
He could do a very serious role. I think he'd like it.
Yeah.
keep all the mustache and beard and everything.
Yes.
But no, I was it's just really interesting. I just feel I'm recommending the book to you guys more than a pitch here, but I think that there's something good here. I wish that I had some idea where it's going to go, but I feel sometimes when you make a pitch, it might just be pitching an idea. You just feel it's a great idea, and maybe that means I'm more of a producer on this one versus a writer. But I think I could go to the mat for it. I think I would raise money for it. I think I would totally want to see that. And I think it would be really fun, and I'd love to have a creative team that could think outside the box and have kind of these creative storytelling. What if it was all women? I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be really cool.
I think that would be a fun way to tell the story. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of the fun thing with theater. It's what I think is fun about it is the personalities in the story, but I think there's a lot of open ways to telling it. And I think that, when you collaborate, you work with other folks, you get something a little bit better than you would have done on your own. And yeah, I'd love to see something kind of done out of these stories because I think they're fun and they're relatable, and I think it kind of would be able to show folks that, there was a time when the wealthiest people in America, the most educated people in America were how can we make everybody else in America like us? Mm-hmm. And they founded universities, and they founded endowments, and they invested in education and preserving land. And I think that we've gotten a little bit away from that. I think that there has been a bit more of a push towards capitalism so that, the Keystone Pipeline wins and the land loses. And
well, we've seen the abandonment of any sort of idea that wealth carries with it obligation.
Right.
Because that's really what Teddy Roosevelt came out of, and what Taft came out of as well. And it's seen as a big part of the Kennedys and Franklin Roosevelt's background and everything, was this idea of if you are fortunate enough to have been part of a wealthy family, if you're fortunate enough to be part of a wealthy family, then you owe something to the country that helped you get to that point, and you owe something to the people who are still supporting you and supporting your wealth. And we've really seen throughout the 20th century a shift in thinking away from that and toward, well, it's my money, I earned it, why should I have to do anything with it that I don't want to?
And I think it is, for me, in literature, having read Girl Lit, because I'm a girl, I think of a story like Emma, where she goes and provides food and company to their poorest neighbors, or Little Women. You know, like, I think that really was, like, a big thing in the turn of the century, back in, like, the late 1800s to early 1900s, where, you know, if you had something, you helped out your neighbor.
Yeah.
And I think that I've seen a lot of common people do that. Like, I think the citizenry of the United States tends to shine their best. I know we don't see the best examples online, but I feel like, you know, in our community, I think I've certainly seen people who were willing to try to do what they can.
Yeah.
You know, I know when I went on furlough, one of my coworkers tried to say, if you need a bill paid, you just send it to me and I'll pay your bill, which I think is nice.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not going to impose on somebody. That's just not our culture anymore. I think I would have felt very awkward, like, well, here's my light bill, despite the offer. But I feel like that spirit of America is still here in its people. I think we just need to, like, that's the type of spirit I want to get back to. I know my grandparents are definitely the type of people where it's like they would give you the shirt off their back. Mm. Even though they didn't have a whole heck of a lot, if you really needed something, we would figure out a way to do it. And I feel like we try to do that as well in our lives, and I know all of our friends and our family do as well, which is why we're friends and family, right?
Yeah. Well, and I always say one of the things that I remember about Taft when I was reading about Taft myself is that Taft was always a really good story to me about when you're in power, the rule of law is still important. Because Taft, one of the things that Taft and Roosevelt didn't really see eye to eye on was antitrust legislation. Roosevelt felt all of these companies needed to be broken up. You shouldn't have the monopolies. You definitely shouldn't have the vertical monopolies. And Taft didn't really see the harm of monopolies. But once Taft became the president, the antitrust laws were the law of the land. Yeah. So whatever his personal political beliefs were, Taft saw to it that the law was actually executed with regards toward antitrust, and actually wound up overseeing more antitrust cases than Teddy Roosevelt himself.
Well, I think like you brought up a really good point, and I think that that's kind of like what people would see as a negative to Teddy Roosevelt is he would wheel and deal, and he would break the law if he's like, that's not right. Mm. You know, I feel like, what are all the alignments, right? Yeah. You know, like he's very much like...
Oh, the chaotic...
Yeah, he's not lawful. Like he's literally like, if he felt it was right for him, he would want to change it, and he could get to change it because he's the president. I believe that would be
chaotic good.
Yes.
Yeah. He believes he's working he believes he's working in the interests of the good.
Yes.
But he's not necessarily that concerned about the law.
Yes, and that's exactly how it is, which I think, like, as a president, that's a little scary to be like, I think I'm right. I'm going to just make it so, right? Yes. Even though, like, he did a lot of really good things, but it's like, it was fairly illegal. Mm-hmm. And like Taft, even though he wasn't charismatic, that was one of the things that he was very, like, hard on is, no man is above the law, not even the president.
Right.
And so that kind of made him a bit stodgy and a bit unfun, but sometimes it's like our most unfun friends that make sure we get home and drink our water and take our vitamins, so.
Well, and, I know that, not to tie everything back into Hamilton and make everything Hamilton, but one of the errors I think an audience member can make in watching Hamilton, as I prepare my study guide for July the 3rd when Hamilton is on Disney Plus, is seeing Aaron Burr as all the way the bad guy. When in fact, I feel like a lot of even the way the story is written for that play, Burr was not the bad guy. He just didn't want to do things the same way Hamilton did.
I feel like it's like we keep kind of seeing these stories of like Jean Valjean and Javert and all this stuff where it's like there's one person who really believes in their point of view and will do anything to kind of execute it, and then the other person who really believes in no, there are laws and there's rules and stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's very, very easy for us, especially when we are young people, To be like, yeah, boo, boo, rule maker. We don't like you. You're a bad person. But everybody kind of comes from their own background, and it's not necessarily like a good and a bad. And I think it's like really, I'm trying to do this myself. I'm trying to enjoy the gray area. I sometimes really revel in it, and I really love it. But I always feel like in my own life, like, this is literally reveling in the gray area, right? No, I want these walls painted. I want it to be done. So I'm trying to say, this is enjoyable. Because if I'm living in mess, then the potential could be anything. I don't know if I'm really being successful at it, but that's what I keep telling myself. That's my little calming mantra there.
So, live in the gray areas. Live in the gray areas. Appreciate the rule of law, but still punch Nazis.
Yes.
Yes.
Wear your mask.
Yes. Wear your mask. Punch Nazis and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds afterward.
I like very early on, we're like, we're not going to talk about political stuff, and now it's all been political stuff. Because everything is politics.
Yeah, yeah. And that's always been the thing. Like, I don't think we wanted to dive directly into a political issue when we were beginning.
But now we're like on episode 104, so it's fine.
Yeah. So,
Well, we hope you kind of enjoyed us talking about history and trying to convince you to read books. Books are great. Check out your local library when you can. There's a lot of really fun stuff online. One of my friends shared that they live out in Charlotte, and they've been saying, here's all these things that are free on these different sites, and they've been putting them out there. So libraries are still great resources. I think I checked on, the not bookshop site that sells books. Until we get a sponsorship by Audible, I'm just not going to say it, okay? And I think it's about $20. So.
Yeah, and of course, we've got our bookshop link going by there, going by that way, which I will be logging in shortly after we get off the air here and adding the Bully Pulpit to the list under the category of we adapted that, which is where anytime we're able to provide, a link to a book for something we've done. Nancy Drew, which I did this past weekend, I put up like a box set of the first 4 books or something like that.
Well, I feel like if I ever do decide to have a firmer adaptation, I'm just going to go back and rewatch this because I think we've said a lot of idioms and platitudes that would make great song titles.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can see generations of auditionees being really, really confused when they try to sing their way through from those to whom much has been given. Yes, the Libby app. Jenny mentions the Libby app in our chat over there. I love the Libby app. We just moved here last year from Columbus.
Yeah, end of last year. Yeah.
The Columbus library system, the Columbus Metropolitan Library System, is just phenomenal.
That's one of the things we miss a lot.
And they had all of the apps. They had the Libby app was set up for them. They had the Hoopla app and all of these things. And then we moved here where there's, I'm not going to say a bad library system. It's actually a good library system, but virtually none of the ebook apps are, they are not registered with any of the ebook apps, so.
And I think it's just like going from a big city to a mid-level city. Like that's just kind of what happens. Like I think where we live likes to think they're still rural and they're just not.
I was very happy when we moved here that I checked our local library system and they said, oh, we have a recording booth.
Yeah.
Because in Columbus, I frequented a library that had a recording booth, and it was a small booth, but it had an iMac and recording equipment and microphone and things like that. Oh, yes. Hi, Dad. Dad is mentioning Robin Williams did a great Teddy in Night at the Museum, I think. Yeah. We
should do a watch through of that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Night at the Museum is, I think, one of my favorite film versions of Teddy Roosevelt is what Robin Williams did. But I was so excited about, we moved here and I was like, the library says they have a recording booth, and I went and I checked it out, and the recording booth was a microphone and a computer in the middle of one of those big echoing conference rooms that you could set aside time to go in there and use the microphone and the computer. And it's like, well, I appreciate that you're providing something for the community here, but at the same time, that's not what I'm expecting when I see we have a recording booth.
Yeah, they had like in basically the Orange County version, which is like not even in the city of Columbus. It's like in a neighboring county.
Yeah.
They had like the StoryCorps recording booth inside the library. So it's this big black trailer. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
They had drag queen reading fairy tales. I mean, it was really neat. I think one of the first places we went was the big, huge Martin Luther King Library downtown, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm. So, libraries, great system. Support your local library.
Yeah. Read some books.
Yes. All right, let's see. Is there anything else? Let's see. On Saturday,
Oh, yeah.
it will be my turn to pitch again. And like Bri did this time, picking a nonfiction book, I had picked a nonfiction book as well. Hold on, I'm going to look up the author's name because the author escapes me at the moment.
That happens to me one day. I'm going to yawn because I've been up since 5:30.
It's like this is going to be...
Although Glenn's been up at 5:45, so.
I have some ideas for how I'm going to try to approach this, but I've got to say, the more I think on this and the more I've been looking over the book again, it's very challenging. You guys have got to show up on Saturday and see if I actually manage to work through this or not. But Michael Lewis wrote a book called Flash Boys. And Flash Boys is the story of people working in the investment industry who discovered how flash trading was destabilizing the economy. You think back a few years, there was that incident where the Dow Jones just like plummeted and nobody knew what it was until they figured out there was this computer algorithm that got triggered and it resulted in this mass sell-off and it very nearly tanked the economy. And that is directly related to what these guys found when they started looking through the system from within. They actually worked for the companies. So I'm very excited to get to talk about Flash Boys and see what I can come up with for musical ideas.
Neat.
All right. So.
I wish we could have a virtual pizza party.
Yes, that would be great.
If we all just agree on Saturday that we'll all eat pizza together,
yes,
I think we can make it happen.
Yeah. Like we'll have pizza
Tell
here.
Tell us below if you're gonna eat pizza with us on Saturday.
All right, we've got Bristol says they'll be there. All right, with pizza. You're gonna have pizza, right?
Yes.
Because
or pizza adjacent.
We don't want to be the only ones. Jenny will be there. We don't want to be the only ones with pizza on this thing, all right?
Yeah. Because I think it'll be fun to celebrate, the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Eating some pizza with friends and family through a virtual experience.
Yes. All right. Love you guys. So happy to be able to talk to you today. And you stay safe out there. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Punch any and all Nazis. And until next time, take care of yourself because, we are not there to take care of you. And she's very, very tired.
Love you. Bye.
Yes, love you guys. Bye.
Living wage work saves lives.
Yes.
Woo. Hey, people, living wage.